Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl as well as the season finale of The Walking Dead. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when to start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supergirl, you can skip to what I say about the season finale of The Walking Dead. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supergirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, the manhunt is on for Lex, and it's kind of interesting because this is all happening around the time of the Alien Amnesty Act repeal, and so that's kind of taking a little bit more priority over the whole looking for Lex situation, which is interesting because it's, I mean, you can understand, I guess, a little bit because it's like, oh yeah, a lot of people are going to be pissed because this is a very heated subject. So obviously a lot of people are going to be split. There might be a lot of like action taken, and so that's taking the biggest focus. Even the DEO is supposed to be looking out for this rather than looking for Lex. Like obviously like the FBI, the CIA, a lot of other like government groups are looking for Lex, but not the DEO in particular. But the fact is he now has superpowers and everything. So there's that. Then there's Lena, who's keeping secrets because she hasn't told everyone everything about what went down. Because, like, to be fair, it's like, oh, Lex, you know, because she ended up talking to her mom, which I'm like, yes, because I was wondering what her mom was going to have to play and what part she would have to play in this and what she would have to say. But for her, she's so proud. It's like, oh yeah, Lex got away. Oh, don't be upset because your brother outsmarted you. And I love Lillian being the terrible person that she is. And to be fair, you kind of understand why she treats Lena the way she does, because Lena isn't her daughter. Lena is the daughter of another woman, so maybe that's why she's always held a little bit of spite towards her. I mean, it always seems like she's always been willing. I mean, because she grew up Lillian's daughter, but still by blood she's not. At least Lex is hers by blood. So I think that plays a role, because it's like, oh yeah, you're the child from the other woman in our lives, you know. So that turns into that whole complicated things. And I think she kind of lashed out and took it out on, you know, Lena, and looked at it as like, oh, Lex is my prize boy, my possession. Lena, you're good, you're okay, but you'll never be Lex, type of thing. So she's always trying to bring her into the fold. But I think her spite for Lena's mom always played a role in that. But nevertheless, but what's interesting is Lillian being like, oh, what are you going to do when the Danvers sisters and Jimmy, like these besties of yours, find out the truth that not only were you working with Lex, it was all for the purpose of you curing him, and now he has superpowers and everything, and basically saying, when it's all said and done, I might be locked up in prison, but you'll be the one that ends up all alone. I'm like, geez, Lillian sucks. Because it's like she just trying to tear Lena down, because for her it's not even like, oh, I'm trying to tear you down to the point you come over to our side. It's like, no, I'm gonna give up, because the fact is you were never going to be on our side. You're over here trying to be the good guy, the hero and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, when it's all said and done, you will have no one. And Lena kind of takes that to heart, because there's a lot of stuff this episode she doesn't really point out, like when it's all said and done. Because I thought it was kind of interesting, because Jimmy was still under the impression that it was Manchester Black that shot him, until later on they're like, oh yeah, it was Eve. It's like, right, Lena knows that Lex had something to do with Jimmy getting shot, but didn't know that it was actually specifically Eve who pulled the trigger, which is a whole level of complicated. Which that whole situation, you know, like I said, I'll kind of talk about that later, but you know, Lena hid the fact is that she knew that Lex was behind, you know, the shooting and stuff like that, because for her, like, she's scared to admit this, because, like, once again, it's like she's built this life to be like, I'm so anti my brother, I'm so anti the Luther name, but you know, even though she had her reasons and stuff like that, because no matter what, that's still her brother, and it's a complicated situation. The fact is she did it behind everyone's back, and she'd been more upfront, maybe people would have been appalled, you know, against it, but you know, they would have probably been a little more understanding maybe. But it's the fact that she did it behind everyone's back that things kind of turned out the way they did. But like the fact that you can tell she's scared, because she's scared that everything she's done and built for herself, the life and friends that she has around her, all that will disappear if the truth comes out amongst the groups, you know. So It was kind of interesting. I almost let it slip my mind that, like, obviously, like, Lena and Supergirl had their issues. I was like, right, because last season they had their falling out and everything, and things are still awkward. But then Lena got pissed because, you know, Kara was like, Supergirl being like, yo, you got this hair and all? My mom told you how dangerous it is. How could you do that? Now you're planning on giving people superpowers. Is that how Lex got his and stuff like that? But then Lena's like, oh, the fact is you just want to jump to the negative. It's like, well, she can't help it. And literally her cousin's arch nemesis is out there with powers, by the way, so of course she's going to a little see red. But I did like, you know, because Alex was like, but the fact of the matter is, because of this, Lena has done a lot of good. She saved Jimmy, and even Kara, you know, done other things. And Jim, you know, Kara's like, you're right. The fact is, you saved Jimmy in a way that I was unable to, so I apologize. It's like, yeah, I'm seeing red with this situation, because for me, it's like, you know, for her, it's like she's got the weight of the world on her shoulders, and that weight's gotten even heavier now that Clark's going, as well as Lex being free. And for her, it's just like, if I slip up even a little bit, because my enemies are out there getting stronger, if I slip up a little bit, that's going to all be on me, because, you know, I cannot fail, I can't budge an inch when it comes to this fight of good versus evil, you know, because for her, it's like, if I slip up even a little bit, it's going to cost people their lives. And for her, it's just like, she's like, for her, it isn't a pride thing. It isn't like, it's her scared that her enemies are going to get stronger and she's going to fail protecting people, you know, she's going to fail her job as a hero. That's what it comes down to. And Lena can kind of understand that, which is interesting, because Lena's keeping the secret, which that's going to be a whole thing too. Like, when eventually Lena does find out about Kara actually being Supergirl, and then, you know, Kara slash Supergirl finding out the truth about Lena, I'm curious to see everyone's reaction, especially Jimmy, considering the fact is, it's like, you know, me and your brother's history. The fact is, he's kidnapped me, tortured me, you know our history, and you still helped him, you know, because especially for Kara, it's like, you helped out the man who's tried to kill my cousin for years. That's going to piss her off, and Alex is going to be like, you working with you this mad scientist genius, and now you've literally given him powers. It's like, everything's going to come tumbling apart potentially. I think whether Lena wants it or not is going to come out, whether it's going to be like Eve telling the truth, or Lex spilling the beans, or even Lena herself. I kind of feel like it's going to be outside of Lena's hands when it comes out. Maybe she's going to tell somebody, maybe she's going to confide in Jimmy, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see ultimately what she does with all of that. Because it's really interesting, because this episode led to a lot of pieces kind of falling into place. I mean, for one, we found out just how obsessed Eve is with Lex, to the point that literally her password is I love Lex. Literally everyone is like, ew, gross. It's like, yeah, it shows you how her obsession went. But it does seem like there's still some good in her, because she looked after her cousin who had cancer and everything. So it shows that Eve isn't all evil, even though she's kind of mixed up with an evil group. I don't know. I'm curious, because I was thinking maybe this episode was going to dive a lot deeper into Eve's situation, like learning how and why she became the way she is, why she is so obsessed with Lex and stuff like that, but it didn't necessarily go in that route. Maybe we'll see it later on down the road, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. All the while this is happening, you know, you have Jimmy dealing with everything, basically going through PTSD, and his sister's reaching out for him, but I think it's just a pride situation, because at first Jimmy's trying to be like, it's not Lex, but it's like, yeah, literally the man who's caused you a lot of pain, who's kidnapped you and hurt you, because for him he's trying to be like, this has nothing to do with Lex. The fact of the matter is, Lex only did it to get Superman, and Superman's off world, so he had no reason to come after me. It was Manchester Black, and so for him it's like, he wanted any excuse to make it so it was not connected to Lex, because Lex was his trigger. I mean, it's like, it's just a reminder of everything that you've gone through when it comes to him, and just like, you know, being shot like that, almost being on death's door. You know, he's probably been in a bad situation before, but probably never been this bad. Like, his life's been threatened before, and I think that's why Lex is a trigger, because Lex is a reminder of like all the times he was in grave danger, and it reminds him of like, oh, I was here almost about to die, you know, I was literally on death's door. So all that combined is kind of taking its toll on him, but he wants to pretend like he's okay until, you know, he finds out, oh, Lex is behind all this. And when everything went down in the White House, which I'll get to that soon enough, like all of it, all the gunfire and stuff kind of triggered, and he couldn't really do anything, and that's when he realized like, I do have a problem. Like at that moment, like he shut down. Not like it's a bad thing. I mean, it's understandable after everything he's been through, but that White House situation is something to discuss. Like obviously, because initially Ben was going to that senator to be like, oh, let's go with this whole repeal, but she ended up being one of the people that said no to the repeal, because for her it's like, there's a lot of powerful aliens on this planet. How do you think they're going to react if they find out like, oh, we said, we're trying to repeal their positions and stuff like that? So Ben tried to talk his way out of that, but she wasn't really listening or hearing that. It's kind of interesting. That actress, I've seen her pop up in a few things. She played the engineer in season 1 of Travelers, at least the body that the engineer took over. If you've seen the show Travelers, you know what I mean. But I've definitely seen her in other stuff too from time to time. But nevertheless. But later on, it's like, oh, her mind changed, because I'm assuming the other Supergirl, the other Kara, and Eve, because Eve was definitely there. So the whole point is like, it turns Lex is behind all of that too, just to because all of this is to cause some unrest, because the whole point was to frame Supergirl, basically attack the White House and make it look like she's public enemy number 1. And even, Jimmy beforehand had told Ben, it's like, oh yeah, because he's like, I have no connection to Lex. He's like, are you sure about that? Didn't have the full conversation. Now we see Ben kind of pissed later on. I'm wondering, is it just because he knows that maybe this is connected to Lex, or is it simply because for him it's like, oh, these aliens are going too far, like heating him up to the point like he's going to lead the charge against this anti-alien situation? Because now things have gotten worse, because obviously people are going to look at aliens as even more of monsters, even though it was like obviously the Red Daughter who did it, but it's a well executed trap and everything like that, because obviously Eve revealed herself on news like that just for a little bit, just because she knew somebody would see it. So, and now it's turned into a situation that Supergirl is literally enemy number 1. The president has labeled her that. Everyone around the world, like I'm saying, like, because the whole point Lex created this, he said it before, it was like he needed a patsy, and it's like he needs everything to kind of fall in line so that when the time comes, he can get someone like Ben Lockwood to kind of rage everything up, and then he can step in and be like, hey, I'm going to be the hero to save the day. You guys said I was evil and was this and that, but I was trying to stop Superman because I knew that Supergirl would become the ultimate evil. Like, the Kryptonians, we can't trust them. I've told you from the beginning the dangers of what was coming, but you didn't listen. Here I am to basically be your savior. So, is that 100% how he's going to do that? I'm not sure, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see things going forward, because like Supergirl can't go around saving the day now just because of this. It's going to make her relationship with everyone in the city, not just the city, the world, very, very complicated. And because there was a whole point that Lex had made too of like, oh, you're going to have to pretend to be Supergirl. I thought that was going to potentially come up sooner in the regard of like, oh, like they're going to kidnap Kara and then like she's going to pretend to be Kara and Supergirl. But I kind of feel like the fact, because he said that line, I think it's going to be a situation we see come up later on. It's going to be a thing of him, like the Red Daughter infiltrating her life like that, like after a little while. Like she's probably just going to pretend to be Kara for a while. For what purpose? I don't know. After causing all the damage that she's done, like what purpose will that go? So maybe it was simply about impersonating Supergirl, but I think they're going to try and get Supergirl out of the way for a while, so she'll probably the Red Daughter will probably be living as Kara. That's what I'm assuming, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. Obviously, not everyone is against her, because Alex is like, there's no way that was Supergirl. Even Colonel Haley is like, yeah, that wasn't Supergirl. And Lena knows, because Lena knows that, like, yeah, it's her brother and he does some very duplicitous stuff, which is interesting. I guess it kind of helps that Lena and Supergirl did kind of make up. So it's like, we got your back in this situation. But that's probably going to get ugly the moment Lena's situation gets revealed. So that's probably going to add a layer of complications to it. Because the interesting thing is, when it's all said and done, like, well, I'm sure Kara saw the other Kara, but she still doesn't know or understand that whole situation. It's so interesting. Like I said, it's like, I thought the entire back half of the season would be about just the Red Daughter, but it's just so interesting that everything is so intertwined. It's like they strung it on a little bit, and then it's like full force of like, this is the root of everything. Like the whole Red Daughter storyline being the heart of just everything that's going on. You just didn't know it at the time. Like I said before, I just think that's so fascinating. And like I said, it's so interesting, especially because it plays up what Kara had already talked about before, like letting her guard down just for a little bit and just everything. Essentially it's like in that one moment, everything in her entire world, all the good she's done was basically undone because it makes it look like she's the enemy of the state and stuff like that. Well, not just the state, an enemy of the world. Like I said, this is just going to cause more problems for other aliens. So a lot of aliens might turn against Kara. Maybe some of the more radicals might support her, but a lot of the more like, we're trying to live a peaceful life, you ruined this for us, might turn against her in that regard too. We'll ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. But there's also the whole John storyline I thought was kind of interesting, because for him, he's in a very similar situation, and I thought it was so fascinating because for him it's like he's kind of having an identity crisis, and for him it's like, if I go away, if I lose who I am literally the last Green Martian. If I let my identity fly away, the fact of the matter is all who my people were, who they are, their knowledge, their religion will all fade away with me if I don't stop. Because basically he's got the entire Green Martian race, the kind of, shoulder on his own, And so he tries to talk to his dad, because for him it's like he's so confused and he's so worried because he had heard this story of shapeshifters who shapeshifted so long to survive, and then eventually they forgot who they were, what they were, everything about themselves, and he's worried it's going to happen to him too. And so he talks to his dad, and his dad's basically saying, I think basically his dad ended up saying all the stuff that John kind of felt. He's like, oh, you're a failure, John, but and being like, the fact is I gave you those sacred marks and you failed me. You're not a man of peace. You ended up killing Manchester Black. Like saying all this stuff to kind of push John. You could tell from the beginning it's like kind of a tough love situation, because John finally breaks. He's like, the fact of the matter is, you should have never asked me to do this. I shouldn't have accepted it. The fact of the matter is, even if I have to give up the sacred marks and texts and stuff like that, the fact of the matter is, I am who I am. I am Martian Manhunter, and the fact is, even if I have to give up everything, at least I'll know who I am. And that's what the whole point was. It was kind of a beautiful moment for John and his dad, because his dad was like, I should have never asked you. I never meant for you to be me. The whole point was for you to go about doing things the way you have before, but your own path, your own way. Because for John, all of this was about trying to find a better way to continue what his father believed. And because for him it's also like, oh, I failed Mars, I'm not going to fail Earth. But now he feels like he's failing all over the place. But the whole point was for his dad to be like, you are the Martian Manhunter, embrace that, accept that as who you are. Because it's not like you've done a bad job before now, but it's just because like his dad's like, instead of giving you my unconditional love, leaving that as kind of a mark and a reminder for you, I put this heavy burden on you. I never wanted you to follow this path. I am proud of you as the Martian Manhunter and the good that you've done as that. And so I think John has a bit more balance to it. It's kind of interesting because he's even talking about burying the sacred text somewhere for someone that's ready to take upon it. And I'm curious, because it's a storyline we haven't gone back to in a little while. I kind of get the feeling it might be Miss Martian. That might be something they do with that. I don't know. That'd be interesting if that ends up being the case, but it might not be. Maybe there's just someone else that's going to take up that. It might not even. I would assume it to be a Martian. Even though white Martians are the only ones left, but I would assume it would be a Martian, not unless it's someone else. Maybe that's hinting to something from the comic books. I don't know. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. I'm very curious to see how all this plays out going forward. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see how the entire world reacts and how Kara handles the situation, everything Jimmy's going through too, because he finally gets help from his sister at the end, and what that ends up looking like. It's going to be interesting to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to the season finale of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I was sitting there watching the episode thinking about something. Has it ever been winter in this show before? I don't think so. Not unless I'm remembering wrong, but I don't think so. I don't know. So basically, obviously, like I said, it's so interesting because I'm comparing this episode to the last episode. Because like I said, a lot of the heavy stuff went down this episode. Not nearly as much, but this episode was kind of interesting in the sense of, like, obviously it's kind of like the come down from what happened last episode into kind of leading into potential what the future has in store. Because basically, winter's coming, like things are bad at the kingdom. It's falling apart. They should have left sooner, but things are to the point they can't stay in the kingdom anymore, especially with the conditions being the way they are. So basically they have to go back to Hilltop and respectively Alexandria. It's a whole thing, but there's a lot of interesting things to bring up. Like, for one, I figured Lydia would catch a lot of flack, because you even have Alden, which understandably he lost Enid, so of course he's going to blame her. But to be fair, it's like you're calling your grief the fact that she lost Henry, the one person in the world who gave a damn about her anymore. Can you make the argument her mom gave a damn about her at one point in time in her twisted logic? But the fact of the matter is, Henry's the only person who ever genuinely cared about her, and so she feels guilty about that, because it's not just Henry that died, it was a whole bunch of other people. And you had Daryl trying to make her feel better. It didn't even click in my head, like, Daryl probably feels just as guilty as she does, because he's the one that set this all in motion. He helped Lydia get there, and to be fair, it was all Henry's idea. And then even Carol's having a hard time, because every time she looks at Lydia, she sees Henry. And literally in the entire episode, the weight is starting to get to Lydia, to the point she's trying to let a walker bite her. And then at one point she's telling Carol, you finish me, you kill me, and it has to be you. I'm sorry, because this is the only way it's going to balance things out, because if I'm not around anymore, basically because I think for her, in her mind, it's basically, as long as I'm with this group, as long as I'm one of you, my mom is always going to have a target on this group. But if I'm dead, to be fair, if you're dead, I think it probably just, your mom and her craziness Alpha would probably just kill them anyway, just because even Daryl was keep my daughter safe. You won't be able to keep her safe. But she's like, I'm hoping I'm wrong. She said that last episode, so who knows? But it's so sad, because the fact is, and something I didn't even think about, it didn't even cross my mind last episode. Let's not forget, this isn't the first time Carol's lost a kid. She lost her daughter years ago, and it's right, so she has to go through this pain again, and it's that's a lot for anyone to have to go through in that regard. I mean, obviously we saw what kind of effect losing Carl had on Rick. It's actually kind of interesting when you break that down and think, well, I think Rick has another kid in the comic book. I think him and Andrea had a kid. And they might have, I don't remember. Because Judith died in the comic books when Lori died. So it's just kind of if we went by comic book logic and say Judith wasn't there and he lost Carl too, Jesus, I don't know. I mean, he'd be literally in the same situation as Ezekiel and Carol, as I'd assume he would have been. And so, but for Carol, I think when she looks at Lydia and sees how broken up she is about it, it's she realizes, I'm not the only one that lost Henry, so did she, the one person that cared about her. Because for her, it's Henry said I'm a good person, but I'm not. The fact of the matter is, I'm a problem. This is all happening because of me, so kill me. Because she wanted to die just because the guilt was eating her up. And I think Carol just couldn't bring herself to do it, especially because it's knowing how important she was to Henry. And it's killing her was not going to bring Henry back. It's not going to make things better. Because even she was saying that, we all think going to Hilltop's going to make things better. It's no, it's not going to change shit. It's not going to bring back the people that we lost, For Carol, I don't know. It's really hard to say why she necessarily did. Was it simply for Henry's sake? Because, she's the only tie that she has left, that Lydia's the only tie that Carol has left to Henry in that regard? I don't know. Or maybe it's I was saying, just Henry staked so much on protecting her. He, because of his good heart, he decided to help Lydia. So who am I to turn away this girl, who's especially in this condition, who's suffering just as much as I am? Because maybe in Carol's mind, it's that loss is something you can feel too, and that guilt you feel, how can I punish you when you're punishing yourself already, That all kind of ties into a certain extent, especially, speaking of Carol, the whole Daryl and Ezekiel situation. Because Ezekiel was oh, do you think you can, give me and Carol some time? I thought that was him kind of on some jealousy stuff, maybe just some level, but it's because, Carol and Daryl have always had a connection. But it's more so because Carol's the fact of the matter is he has to blame you because he can't bring himself to blame me. It's right. Because Daryl will probably get some of the blame too, because he's the one that kind of orchestrated this whole thing. He's the one that made a decision to protect Lydia at first, not to give her over immediately. He kept Lydia alive, so all that probably is on him, but also the whole him, Henry, and Lydia and Connie situation, that was on him too, He even suggested taking Lydia away, and it's Carol's do you want to go? And he's no, especially after everything that's going down. Of course, he doesn't want to be away from the group, this family, after everything that they've lost just now. And it led to an interesting conversation between Michonne and Ezekiel. For her, she's like, I thought us being separate would make us stronger, because it's like, but in fact it did the opposite, because for her it's like, Alpha was able to sneak amongst our groups because we literally don't know each other anymore. Like, if we were still tight-knit groups, we would have been like, yo, she's an imposter. She was able to do what she did was because the groups were in the situation they were in. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because let's not forget, like, Ezekiel walked up to her like, oh, who are you? And she had to lie and be like, oh, this is where I'm from, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, that only happened because they weren't the tight-knit groups that they were once upon a time. And so... and it's like, we can never let that happen again. So I think this situation, through this tragedy, comes like this rebirth of like the groups kind of coming together again, so there's some silver lining to the shitty situation. It's also interesting too, because there's a whole conversation about like, okay, so what about Hilltop? Hilltop can't come to any decisions because not only did they recently lose Jesus, now on top of that, they lost Tara too. That's also something I didn't even think about talking about too. It's like, it's crazy to think about, like, man, Tara's been a part of the show since season 4, and it's like, man, she's going now too. I mean, once again, it's like, just because you've been in the show for a while doesn't mean diddly squat. I mean, once again, this is like Henry's first season. Like, that actor playing Henry. So, like, it doesn't matter, but it's still just kind of like, especially Ezekiel looking at her name, and it's just like, Jesus. Like, that whole thing just kind of rocked everybody. Especially because I think everyone is beaten down. Everyone's trying to hold on to hope, hoping that everything will turn around. But it's like, at moments like this, when everything's falling apart, you almost feel like you can't catch your breath in the sense. It's almost just kind of like you're just running just to keep pace, but it almost feels like it's futile in a certain extent. I mean, that's at least, how I was kind of feeling, and just think everyone felt about it in its episode. It's sad. They have to sneak across Alpha's territory, trying to make sure they didn't run into any of her people. It doesn't seem like they did. It seems like it's mainly walkers, but if they see those dead walkers, they might start pressing questions. But to be fair, maybe they won't reach out that far in their territories. Who knows? But still. What's even more depressing is the fact that they had to walk by the sticks that everyone's heads were on at the end of last episode. It's like, Jesus. Like, it's, it's still fresh in their minds anyway. And on top of that, like, it's definitely been a little bit of damage, especially considering the way that the weather is. Even the fact is that they had to abandon the kingdom like that. It means, like, it's probably been, like, maybe a couple, I doubt days. It's probably been, like, a couple weeks, potentially. So it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if the situation had led to, like, Alpha's people, I got to correct myself on that. I don't know whether it's the Whisperers or the Whispers. I don't remember. I've been calling them the Whisperers the entire time, but they might be the Whispers. I'm pretty sure it's the Whisperers, but either way, it would have been interesting if they were caught by, like, some of her people, but it seems like her people were away during the winter time. I guess because they've been out there kind of away from all of the, because they've been neck deep in this situation in the past. Like, even though we've potentially never seen winter in The Walking Dead, doesn't mean they haven't dealt with it in general, but also especially her people, so they probably knew with the weather and stuff like that. Like, they've been living amongst the dead, so they know how to kind of adjust to it. So it seems like they were away for a while. Not less that was Beta referencing the fact is that they've been away from their home, in particular, like, their main hub for a while. So either way, that in itself is an interesting thing, because Alpha's like, basically, I've made mistakes I can't make again. It's like, I gotta be stronger for what's to come. And she reaches her arm out, and Beta starts lashing her arms like she did Lydia. Is that some twisted way of kind of remembering her daughter? But I guess it's for her kind of like whipping all the pain away. It's like, I've got to turn myself into even more of a machine. I can't let my emotions get the best of me. I let them get the best of me now, and I can't let that happen again. I've got to be strong, especially for what's to come. Meaning, like, I think when it's all said and done, no matter what they do, even if they avoid the territories because Lydia's there, Alpha's always going to go after them, because, like, she has to cut out that piece of her heart, because, like, Lydia will always be her weakness. So I think she's going to be aiming for Lydia, trying to kill her potentially for all that. So that's one situation. Then on top of that, there's the whole Alexandria situation where everyone has to kind of buckle up together because of the storm and everything. It's like, yeah, we got to bring Negan along because Negan might, freeze to death. So, and I love it. The moment he gets in, what does he do? Negan starts talking shit. It's like, oh man, look at this complicated situation we in. The fact of the matter is, it's like, Gabriel, like, the fact of the matter is, it's so good of you, oh, look, the fact is that your girlfriend's baby daddy is her baby doctor. And the fact of the matter is, like, what do you think? You know, there's got to be some part of your brain that wonders, like, what are they doing during their quote unquote appointments? It's like, you're such a dick. I love it. But Gabriel's like, come, you know, could you be less predictable? He's like, okay, father, not father. It's like, you're such a dick. And I love it when it was all said and done. I'm like, okay, like the heat went out of here and stuff like that. And Eugene's gonna explain it his own way. And Gabriel be like, oh, Eugene, I missed you. And Eugene's like, yeah, too bad I didn't miss you. But it's like, yeah, everyone's getting ready to leave, pack up. And he's like, not one of you assholes is going to untie me. And then you even have Rosita being like, you know, we could just like let, you know, Michonne know, like, hey, it was an act, you know, it was nothing we could do about it. I love it. Judith ended up running off trying to, you know, get the dog and everything, because I guess for her it's like, I'm responsible for it, so I promised Daryl to look after it for him. And, you know, Negan shows up and, you know, helps. Wounded leg and everything, carries Judith away. It's actually kind of interesting and very sweet when he explains it later on, because Michonne's like, thank you. He's like, basically like, the fact is, you know, that girl is, you know, a Spitfire, and you've kind of basically been through so much. I think like that was essentially him being empathetic. It's like, you've lost so much and been through so much already. I wasn't going to let you losing one of your children, like, you know, happen to you. So that's why he did what he did. And it's like, huh. I think we might see Negan start, like I brought up before, like joining forces with all this, which that's a complicated situation, sure, especially when Negan is the way he is, that he kind of talks shit and kind of pushes people away. I didn't even think about this, but until he brought it up, he's like, oh, he was asking how everyone else is going. Even Michonne's like, you really care? It's like, yeah, I don't know their names, but it's like, hey, the kingdom, it fell. The fact is, he's like, I know what it's like to, you know, have a fallen kingdom. It's like, yeah, it sucks. It sucks ass. And so we might see Negan start working with the groups more, especially because, like, that was a worry that, you know, Ezekiel had. It's like, we cannot afford to go to war with the Whisperers, because the fact of the matter is we still don't know how to fight them yet. Once again, it's like, how do you fight an enemy that's like that, an enemy that could be at any point in turn? It's just annoying as hell and deadly, you know, because it's like, especially in the circumstances they are right now, where they're literally not in a position to be going to war with these people, who are just, you know, after suffering the losses that they have, trying to recover from that, plus knowing how to deal with them in general, because they have the larger numbers, because it's not just them, it's also the walkers too. So that's a whole can of worms all on its own. But I'm very interested to see where that whole Negan and Judith situation goes, because it does seem like he is taking care of her like a daughter. It almost seems like, I guess because it seems like he feels like he owes it to Rick, you know, especially with their complicated relationship. But I think he also, because he had his connection with Carl, and I think maybe it's like, oh, let me look after Carl's sister, like, because especially because he sees that spirit he saw in Carl, he sees in Judith. And that was something, like, I remember reading, and I've talked about this before, way before, like, the whole thing of, like, I remember reading something, I just casually saw the title of something one time being like, is Carl going to be the next Negan in the comic books? That's where that was kind of heading. And I was like, well, who's to say that that, you know, Judith doesn't end up being that way? But to be fair, Negan isn't even Negan anymore, so maybe we won't even see that situation come about. But alright, I also forgot to talk about it too, like, they try to get in contact with Maggie, so that's definitely going to be interesting. I don't know how that whole situation is going to break down, especially because, like, well, Lauren Cohen's currently on Whiskey Cavaliers, so I don't know if, like, that production schedule would allow for her potentially coming back to the show. Like, I don't know what those circumstances are. Don't really want to know. Don't want to read into it if it ends up being like this and that, blah, 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 blah. Just like, I'm just curious. I don't know. Because there might be, like, drama reasons and stuff like that, and it's like, that's not, I don't care to learn about that stuff. It's like, I'm fine not knowing all, like, the detail behind it, because once that stuff comes out, it kind of ruins a show in certain regards for you. Like, that's me going on a tangent, so that's kind of beside the point, but it does beg the question of, like, especially what's going on with all that, especially after everything that's going down. I'm curious, like, who will take over for, at Hilltop. It was also interesting, too, because I think at Hilltop we saw a whole bunch of paintings basically representing all the people they lost, because it looked like one of them was Herschel. I think the other one one of them might have been Glenn. I think, I could be wrong, you know, but that might be the first time I've ever seen those. I wonder, I don't know. That was just kind of interesting. Like, have they always been there, or is that just like a little I don't know, just kind of an interesting detail. Because it's interesting because it kind of ties, not necessarily ties in, but it was interesting because Lydia was like, oh, like, is Alexandria seems like a cool place. Like, why did you leave? Because that's a whole can of worms, too. Because it was like, yeah, because of Daryl and, you know, Rick. Because him and Rick weren't necessarily in a good place. And then everything going down like that. Like, you know, Rick was like a best friend to him, like a brother. So, like, that whole situation is like, I can't go back without Rick. So that being a whole thing in itself. So, but it does seem like when it is all said and done, you know, sadly everything between Carol and Ezekiel, because Ezekiel's like, I know you got to do this, but the fact of the matter is I will always love you. And she's trying to give the ring back, but he's like, he doesn't accept it. So for her, it's like, it was nice living the fairy tale for a while, playing the role of the queen and everything. But I think for a lot of the kingdom, it's like, no matter what, you might not be here anymore, but the fact is you will always be our queen type of thing. Because the kingdom might have fallen, like maybe they'll go back to their home, but even then it doesn't matter because their home is with the people. As long as the people are there, the kingdom will continue to live on. So, and I like, obviously the radio system is set up, so now it's like that aspect of, even when we're apart, we can't stay in contact. Though we do hear someone at the very end getting on the radio. So it's like they've already got Alpha and her people to deal with. Now there's someone else out there reaching out. I mean, who knows? Because, you know, there are ties between both shows. So that might be connected to something from Fear the Walking Dead. Once again, I have not seen any of Fear the Walking Dead. I've seen tidbits here and there, but not enough to, like, know the full story. I've only seen, like, little bits here and there. But not unless that ends up being something there. We'll ultimately have to wait and see what ends up happening with all of this. The show is returning for its 10th season. I'm very interested to see where things take us going forward. Like I said, it's just like, obviously this ends off kind of on like this somber yet hopeful note. Especially at the end, you know, you saw everyone, you know, Judith, RJ, Carol, Michonne, Aaron, Carol, Lydia, all like smiling and playing in the snow and just being like, even with everything being what it is, there is still some hope because they are all back together, that these groups are reunited. So I'm curious to see where all that takes us carrying over into, you know, the next season, what surprises they might have. Because like I said, like a lot of stuff has just shifted a lot in just this past episode, just these past episodes in general. And I'm also curious to see where Lydia's story takes us going forward, everything that's going on with Alpha and her people, what this other voice on the radio might mean, what new challenges await them. Once again, are we going to do some time skipping? Because like I brought up, they've been time skipping like hell lately, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes down. But really, that's all I want to talk about today. Next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good